I need something to talk about on today's episode of Comic Class. Is there anything big that happened in the world of comic books recently? Something that maybe went on over the weekend that would provide me with a lot of stories to talk about? No, seriously, was there? Hey everyone, it's me, Aaron, and welcome to another episode of Comic Class, the show every single week on this channel where we just geek out about comic books. And as you can tell from that opening, this is our San Diego Comic-Con 2018 recap episode, in which I'm going to cover all the big comic book stories that came out from that show. But I wasn't entirely joking when I said, is there anything that happened this weekend? Because yes, San Diego Comic-Con, it is still a huge, massive event. But before we get into all the news stories, I feel like we need to kind of talk about the current state of San Diego Comic-Con, because for generations, it was the big, massive, huge, geeky event that we all look forward to every single year. But we've been hearing some whispers, some rumbles going on that, yeah man, eventually it's going to start dying down, and we think it's going to start happening soon because we've been seeing all these other companies start to say, oh, we're going to hold our own thing. We're going to have our own big press conference, and San Diego Comic-Con, it's not going to be that big of a thing for us. But then San Diego Comic-Con would roll around, and then they would hop out like, oh, we were just kidding. We're still here. Like us, everybody. Yeah, here's that big trailer you were all waiting on. Isn't that great? Oh, man, please like us. So yeah, it seemed like everybody for years kept saying, we're not gonna really do San Diego Comic-Con, and then they would do San Diego Comic-Con. This was the first year that I really saw people kind of make good on that promise. Yeah, for years, we've been hearing that Disney, they don't really need San Diego Comic-Con. They've got their own big annual conference where they can show off all their stuff, but they would still show up to San Diego Comic-Con. This year, they legit did not show up to San Diego Comic-Con. I kept hearing that they weren't going to show up. I was like, nah, they're gonna still do something. Any minute now. I know they're not like scheduled for anything, but they'll do like a Nintendo Direct conference that does at E3 where they just release a video or something. No, there was nothing. Like nothing at all. But here's the thing. Disney has their own thing that they do every single year. Sony doesn't. And Sony didn't really show off anything. Fox didn't really show off anything. Nobody really did anything this year at San Diego Comic-Con except for Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers is the only one who still rolled in there like, we got everything to show you. This is all the stuff that you've been waiting for. And everybody cheered and applauded. And then no one else really even tried to compete with them. It's very interesting because you look at what they showed off. And honestly, you got Aquaman, you got Shazam, you got the Godzilla trailer. It's like, you look at all that, and it's like, oh, they might actually win San Diego Comic-Con this year. But then there was no competition for it. Like, even if they had competition, they probably still would have won, because they had a really good show. But it kind of makes their victory seem hollow this year. Warner Brothers finally won San Diego Comic-Con, and it's when everybody else stopped trying to compete. But it wasn't just the movie studios either, although that's probably the most important thing because let's be real, the movie studio announcements are the big thing that bring people to San Diego Comic-Con. So if they leave, it raises some questions about the future of San Diego Comic-Con. But even when it comes to comic books, DC came to present. They came in there and they were like, we got this thing, we got this thing, we got this thing, we got this thing. Marvel really had nothing, which in all fairness, Marvel just finished launching Marvel Fresh Starts. And if Marvel came in here and said, here's the new wave of number ones we're putting out, I would have lost my mind. I would have said, no, freaking stop it. So I applaud them for not doing that, and I understand why they didn't really have anything to announce. But yeah, it's just kind of odd that DC is really the only one who had anything to announce. And Marvel had basically little mini tie-ins to Spider-Geddon that they brought up, and that was kind of it. I mean, there was some other things, and we will get into that, but yeah, they really did not have a whole lot that they showed off. It's kind of bizarre. Again, as I said, when you look at what Marvel has currently done with Fresh Start, how they just kind of finished the last big thing that they were working on, and they just start up their new Infinity thing, so it's like, okay, we all know about that stuff, but it's not like you even really showed off anything like, oh, and here's the upcoming next storyline for the new Spider-Man book, the new Venom book, here's his second storyline after the current one is done, here's the next big thing that Ta-Nehisi Coates is working on in Captain America. there really wasn't all that much stuff that they had to talk about. And I'm wondering if even Marvel is now going to be moving over to the big Disney conference every single year. And it does raise some questions about the future of San Diego Comic-Con. I mean, heck, Image Comics didn't even really do anything. But then again, Image has their own show every single year. They don't need San Diego Comic-Con. And that's the thing. Because of the internet, because everybody can access this information whenever they want, because someone can host their own press conference and just stream it on Twitch and on YouTube. They don't even have to like build their own website anymore where they go, well, if you want to watch it, you have to come to our specific website at this specific time on this specific day. No, you can literally just Twitch stream an entire press conference. You just gotta rent out the big hall where you're gonna hold the show. That's it. It's incredibly simple to do this stuff now. Because of that, when people say they don't need San Diego Comic-Con, yeah, they don't really need San Diego Comic-Con anymore. And I'm not coming in here as some big fearmonger saying San Diego Comic-Con is dying. Oh, it's all gonna go away, everyone. In 5 years, there won't even be a San Diego Comic-Con anymore. Millennials are killing San Diego Comic-Con. And restaurants, and Applebee's, and banks, apparently. Oh, God. Aren't those articles just the dumbest? Yeah. I'm not coming in here and saying that. San Diego Comic-Con will always be a thing. It will always exist. But I don't think it's going to be that big, super massive thing every single year that it has been throughout almost my entire life, or at least my entire comic book reading life. Yeah, it's interesting to see that it might go back to being a smaller thing, and in all honesty, I am 100% okay with that. I've always preferred the smaller cons anyway. I kind of hate that these giant, massive cons sell out tickets in 2 seconds like that. I kind of want us to have a con that is a little bit smaller again. I understand that the quicker the tickets sell out, that means the more people are into it, and that's always a good thing. That should be applauded. But, you know what, if San Diego Comic-Con goes back to just being a comic book convention again, then okay, it will be kind of a smaller thing that will be easier to see. You might actually have a chance to get in there, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I mean, if all the people who go to San Diego Comic-Con just because they want to see the Disney announcements now just want to buy tickets to the big Disney show every single year, doesn't that kind of make things easier on the rest of us? I don't know, that's an experiment, that's a theory that I have in my mind. It could just end up that now we have 12 different conventions that everybody is fighting to go to every single year. Yeah, that might not be the best in the long run, but that's the thing. That's just a theory of mine. A comic book theory. Sorry, I had to throw that in there. That's just a theory of mine, and I don't know what's going to happen with it. It is just kind of an uncertain time for San Diego Comic-Con, and I'm very intrigued to see what will come of it. As I said, San Diego Comic-Con is definitely going to survive. It's definitely going to stick around. It's definitely going to continue to be a thing for pretty much forever. But San Diego Comic-Con at the moment is a thing when it happens. It takes over the entire city. San Diego shuts down for the comic book convention, and everything is dedicated to that. It's almost like the entire city itself becomes part of that convention. I don't think we're going to have that in the future. I think it will go back to just being like, oh hey, Comic-Con is this weekend. That's pretty cool. I saw a dude in a costume walking around. That's alright. And you know what? That's fine. It is really cool, this idea that an entire town gets dedicated to this one convention, but we no longer have that. You know, it's fine. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with just going back to it being a regular, giant, massive convention that everyone is fighting to get tickets for. But yeah, so I just wanted to come in here and say, we're at a very interesting time for San Diego Comic-Con. It is going to change, it is going to become something different, but it's not going away. And it's still going to be huge. Just maybe not the huge movie convention that everybody has gotten used to over the past couple of years. It might just go back to being a huge comic book convention. And you know something? That's okay. I'm totally fine with that. Okay, let's go ahead and get into it, but first thing that I have to address is I know a couple of people out there are asking, are you going to talk about the trailers? Because you don't really talk about trailers on this channel anymore. Yeah, I kind of stopped doing that simply because if you're going to do trailer reactions on your YouTube channel, you kind of have to dedicate your entire YouTube channel to that, because 2 years after a movie comes out, people are still interested in what you thought of the movie, but they don't really care what you thought about the first trailer that came out for it. So trailer reaction videos are really good for quick views, but not for long views. and that's kind of what I want to focus on more. So I've kind of stopped focusing on trailer reactions. However, yeah, it's San Diego Comic-Con, there's a bunch of big trailers coming out, and there's one in particular that all you guys have been telling me all weekend long on Twitter. I can't wait to hear what you thought about this. I am dying to know what you thought about this one trailer, so we are going to talk about the trailers. But not here. I will be having a second episode of Comic Class coming out later today, talking about all the big trailers that were released. So, just stay tuned for that. It will be coming up later today. But for now, let's go ahead and talk about all the comic book news. Now, as I said, there weren't a lot of huge stories this year from San Diego Comic-Con, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that Marvel right now is at a weird position where they just started up all their big stuff, so they're not ready to present their next big thing just yet. So they're kind of in this weird limbo state, which is weird because normally Marvel times all of their huge announcements around the conventions, and this is one of the first times I can remember them not doing that. So they didn't have anything huge to talk about, but they did actually have some stuff that I do want to focus on. Some stuff that I actually am really excited for, but DC has the stuff that we need to close the show on. DC had the huge announcements. So starting off with Marvel, they announced for all you Star Wars fans out there a 24-part long epic series that is going to tell spotlight stories of individual characters across all 3 generations of the Star Wars films, including the prequels, including the original films, and including the current Disney films, and I'm actually really looking forward to this. I really dig the idea of Marvel and Disney kind of working together to flesh out this universe even more with the comics. I think they've been doing a pretty decent job so far, but I don't think anybody has really done the best job spotlighting all the current stuff, all this stuff going on with, like, say, Force Awakens and Last Jedi, and I know why. It's because it's still being built. You can't come in here and do huge spotlights of individual characters when their story hasn't really been fully told yet, when there's still one movie out there, so you can't really come in here and tell anything that could totally distort that final film or go against the continuity that the movies are trying to establish for that final film. So I understand why they're holding off a lot on that. However, I am glad that they are going to start telling even more stories. I do realize that we have gotten some stuff. There is the Poe Dameron series, there is Captain Phasma, she got her own book, but I want to see some more, like, individual tales. I want to see some more stuff like, oh hey, who was that guy that Finn was talking to at that bar? Can we get a story on them? Yeah, I want to see more stuff like that. That's the kind of stuff that Star Wars used to do with its expanded universe, where everybody got some fully fleshed out story. I want to see them start taking these smaller characters from these films and start giving them the really big fleshed out treatment. So I think this idea of a 24-part long, like, huge epic that just tells characters from every generation, I think that's really cool. Next up, here's something that I was actually thinking about making a video on, but I don't really have to now because Marvel kind of beat me to the punch. Because last week, a Jessica Jones digital book came out, and I hadn't heard anything about this. They also released a digital exclusive Cloak and Dagger book, but I had at least heard of that one. I didn't know anything about this Jessica Jones book, and it came out and it just shocked me completely, and it shocked a lot of people. I asked on Twitter, did anyone else know that this was happening? And everyone said, no, I had no idea that this was coming out. So yeah, it looks like Marvel is trying to now do what a lot of musicians do, where it's just like, hey, surprise record is dropping right now. I like this idea. Because one of the things that I have said is a big problem of the modern age of comics is that in order for stores to order your product, you have to promote it 3 months in advance. But for all those people out there who don't fully understand the very weird system that comics have to go through, they don't understand that, oh, I saw this thing being advertised, that doesn't mean that I can get it now. That means I have to wait 3 months on. They don't quite grasp that. So this idea of, hey, we're going to promote this thing, and it's available now. I'm interested in seeing where that goes. I'm not saying it's going to do gangbusters. I'm not going to say it's going to work 100%, but it could. And I'm interested in seeing Marvel experiment with this more. And they came in here and they announced, yeah, we're not stopping at Jessica Jones. We're also going to do Iron Fist, we're going to do Luke Cage, and we're going to do The Daughters of the Dragon. All of them are now going to be digital first series. I think that's really cool, and I want to see where this goes. We are at a very weird time for comics, where they do have to finally adapt to the new digital medium, but a lot of the older fans don't want that. So I feel like we've just kind of been waiting for that moment where one of the two big companies finally said, Alright, listen, I know you guys aren't happy about this, but it's gotta happen. It's going to happen eventually. Eventually, that has to become the new standard. And it looks like this is really the first big step that Marvel has taken in that direction. They've done other stuff before. They've, of course, done other digital first series, but not quite like this. This is actually kind of a big wave that they are actually putting out of digital first books, and not of really obscure random characters, but of actually like all the big Netflix characters. That's very interesting, especially because when I was working in the comic book store, I saw a lot of people coming into the store looking for those Netflix heroes who had never really read comics. And for people who have never really read comics, digital is a much more accessible medium than physical print. So I do find this very interesting. I want to see where this goes. But Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, the Daughters of the Dragon, those are all of Marvel's street level heroes, and the street level heroes used to be classified under something known as Marvel Knights. But Marvel Knights eventually just kind of faded away, and it's a shame. I really enjoyed Marvel Knights. Guess what? Marvel Knights is coming back, and it's going to be headed up by Donny Cates. And if you've been watching this channel, you know Donny Cates is my guy at Marvel right now. I was promoting the heck out of that guy before he even got there. I was talking about his series Paybacks and Interceptor for the longest freaking time, and I was so excited when he got over to Marvel, and I'm really excited to see everybody else is really excited for this guy now too. Everybody else is now looking at Donny Cates like, this guy might be our next Bendis. This might be that next guy who we start giving like huge waves of books to, and I want to see what he's going to do when he's put in charge of Marvel Knights. Also, I want to see what Marvel Knights is going to be, because we didn't really get any other hints on this. We got the list of other creators who would be working on books for Marvel Knights, but as I said, Marvel Knights used to be kind of the dark and gritty Marvel stuff. It used to be their street level heroes. Or if it was like big cosmic stuff, it was the more realistic look at those big cosmic heroes, which was a very nice change of pace for a lot of the Marvel books. So yeah, is it still going to be that? Or is it going to be something different now? We don't really know what it's going to be, but here's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that Marvel treats Marvel Knights kind of the same way that DC treats Vertigo, because if you look over at DC, and again we will talk about this in just a second, but DC has recently started up a lot of little subdivisions under their line. They always had Vertigo, which Vertigo was its own unique line of books, all separate from the regular DC universe, but every now and again they might cross over with the other ones, but you know, you didn't really have to worry about continuity all that much. It was its own thing, and when it came to looking at the audience for those books, and when it came to looking at the sales for those books, DC judged the Vertigo books compared to the other Vertigo books. They did not compare, like, say, Constantine, or Hellblazer, I should say, against, say, Superman or Batman. They did not judge their weird little indie books that they were doing for Vertigo against, like, say, Wonder Woman or the Justice League. They judged them against the other books in that line. I'm kind of hoping Marvel does the same with Marvel Knights. Because Marvel, for the longest time, one of the problems is they've just been throwing everything in one big pot. Like, it doesn't matter if your book is aimed at young kids or if your book is aimed at older adults, it's all in the same line of books. It's like, it's not a bad idea to start dividing these up into separate lines, and then you judge the success of the books in those separate lines based on the specific audience that's aimed at. Like, books that are aimed at little kids should not be competing on the same level as books that are aimed at all audiences. Because when you have a book that's aimed at one specific audience, of course it's not going to sell as much as books aimed at the entire huge audience. Same thing goes for the mature reader books out there. Marvel eventually stopped making their Max line because they looked at it and went, yeah, the Max books, they don't compete with Spider-Man. It's like, of course they don't compete with Spider-Man. It's the Max line. It can't sell to all audiences out there. That's the entire point of the Max line. Why are you comparing it to Spider-Man and to Captain America and the Avengers? So I'm hoping that with Marvel Knights, it's more of like an independent thing. It's more of, hey, we're going to get these independent artists come on board and do really strange creative stuff with these characters, and it's going to be its own thing. It's going to be its own thing, and we don't have to worry about how it competes against the main line of books. A good example of the kind of thing I'm talking about would be, say, Vision by Tom King. Because when he did that book, it was very different from anything else that Marvel was doing. It was a much more mature book. It was a book that did exist within the continuity of the other books, but it didn't have the tone of the other books. It was its own original unique thing. So if, say, a book like Vision were under the Marvel Knights banner, I think that would be a great way to establish the new tone of this Marvel Knights series. Speaking of that, guess what book that I was leading into? The new Vision book has been announced. It's coming back for a 6-issue miniseries, and it is going to be written by Chelsea Cain, who a lot of you might remember from the Mockingbird series that she did, a series that was beloved by critics, including yours truly. That thing was on my top 100 books of the year list, and it was high on that list. I freaking love the Mockingbird series, and when I saw she would be doing the Vision, I thought, there is nobody out there who is a better fit to follow up the Tom King run than Chelsea Cain. Because what made the Vision by Tom King so unique is that it not only fully understood the backstory of this character and was able to take this character's backstory and use it to tell these stories in the current day, but it was also able to take this character and use him as a metaphor for many things in the real world. The Vision was a metaphor for discrimination that many people out there felt. That was very obvious. That's not me coming in here and trying to read anything. That was there on like page 1. That was there in your face like, no. We're trying to tell messages about society using the Vision. Chelsea Cain fully understood the backstory and the origin and the history of Mockingbird, used that to tell stories about her set in the modern day, and almost every single issue in there was meant to be kind of a metaphor for, stuff going on in society, and they were using superheroes to tell those stories. So yeah, 100% on board with Chelsea Cain writing the Vision, and also 100% on board with this being a miniseries, because one of the problems that Marvel had for a while is that they said everybody gets an ongoing series, but then it kind of got revealed they didn't actually mean that. When they said it's an ongoing series, they meant we're giving everybody 5 issues. And if you sell enough to keep going after 5 issues, then hey, you get turned into an ongoing series, but we're going to just tell everyone it's an ongoing series because we think that way people will stick around for longer. We think miniseries won't really sell all that much because people know that it has an end point. If they think that it just keeps going on, the more they read it, people will read it more. And that didn't work out. Instead, it kind of had the opposite effect, where now every time that book got canceled, people looked at it and went, oh, all these books from Marvel are getting canceled. And you look at it, it's like, yeah, I don't think they ever meant for Slapstick or Full Killer or Hyperion to be ongoing series. I don't think that they actually truly meant that. I think they actually did mean these are just going to be miniseries, but for some reason they just thought it would be a good business strategy to call them ongoing. I'm glad they're now coming in here and just going, nope, everything's mini. If it sells enough to be ongoing, we'll bring it back. But for now, everything's a mini. I'm totally okay with that. Also, in all honesty, I don't think The Vision should be an ongoing series. Even if it's the best book out there, I don't think that it should be ongoing, because after what Tom King did with that character, I thought to myself, I would love it if they just kept letting new, really unique indie writers come on board, just tell one really interesting story with The Vision, and then they were out. It was like, here's the story that I had to tell, I told it, I'm gone. Because The Vision, one of the things that worked so well about the Tom King run on that, is that it had an endpoint. Is that he had a story to tell. And he told that story, and he didn't come in here and go, okay, well, I told my story, but people want to read more of this, so now I have to come up with a way to extend that 12-issue long story into 24 issues. I need to come up with a way to keep this story going. No, he didn't have to do that. He said, that's my story, I told it. I kind of want to see people just keep doing that. I want to see people go, I have a great 6-issue story idea for The Vision. Tell that 6 issues. 6 issues is done? Cool. That's it. I'm totally okay with them continuing this. And the last 2 big announcements from Marvel have to do with the X-Men. We had gotten a little teaser for something called X-Men Black, and we were expecting it to be a new ongoing series starring Magneto and his own team. No, it is going to be a miniseries. Speaking of Marvel just doing miniseries now, it is going to be a miniseries where every single issue is going to have a new creative team on board doing a 1-issue storyline all about one of the X-Men's villains. I actually think that's an awesome idea, because the X-Men have a lot of really cool villains. But ongoing villain series is kind of hard to do. A villain miniseries full of spotlights? Awesome. I think you can do something great with that. And they got some really interesting choices in here. They got Magneto, they got the Juggernaut, they got Emma Frost, they got Mystique, and they've also got Mojo in there, which I love Mojo. He's so weird and goofy. I love that guy. And they got Scott Aukerman writing him. I really want to see what Scott Aukerman is going to do with Mojo. I think that sounds incredibly fun. So yeah, I think that this is really cool, and if it works, I would like to see Marvel do more miniseries like this, because they've got a lot of great villains out there, but they never really get the love that they deserve. They never get their time in the spotlight, so I do want to see what they could possibly do with other miniseries, like do a Spider-Man Black series, which that actually makes it sound like you're doing the Venom series, but no, you know what I'm saying. Yeah, I would love to see other villain miniseries out there, so I think that's really cool. The other big announcement is that Uncanny X-Men is coming back. And before the con even happened, we got a teaser of Cyclops coming back, and it makes people think, okay, he's going to be the one leading this Uncanny X-Men team. And it does seem like Marvel is trying to do a whole lot of returning back to our roots kind of stuff, a lot bringing back the old heroes. So the idea of Cyclops coming back from the dead, him no longer trying to act like Magneto and acting like the old Cyclops, and him leading an Uncanny X-Men team, that sounds great. And in all honesty, I always loved Cyclops, but I know so many people out there thought he was just a bland toast sandwich. He was just nothing. Nobody ever really gave Cyclops the respect he deserved until he started acting like Magneto, and they was like, yeah, now Cyclops is cool. It's like, he was cool before that, just people didn't really understand how to write him all the time, and he always had to compete with Wolverine. Wolverine was way cooler than Cyclops, but Cyclops, I mean, he was the guy who made sure the X-Men survived for all these years. He was the guy who was trying to live up to Professor X's dream the most, and then they kind of changed him all around to try and make him cool. But we have been seeing a lot of people coming on board the X-Men books recently, like Tom Taylor or Matthew Rosenberg, who they understand these characters, and they want to see these characters treated right. So if you can get Cyclops on a team and have him act like Cyclops and put a writer on that book who knows how to write Cyclops, I will totally be okay with that, and I will totally be behind that. But here's the thing, I know a lot of people are already celebrating, yeah, the Uncanny X-Men are coming back. We know nothing about this book. We don't know who's on it, we don't know what the book is going to be about, and all I can think is, we've kind of been cold on the X-Men Gold book. That book has not been all that good, and it's been disappointing a lot of fans. Man, for all we know, they could just cancel X-Men Gold, rename it Uncanny X-Men, and have the exact same creative staff sticking around. And yeah, it still just won't be all that interesting. So yeah, I'm not celebrating too much yet. I need to hear more about this. I need to see the creative team behind it. I need to hear what the pitch of the book is. But, again, they've been doing right with X-Men Red. Matthew Rosenberg being on Astonishing X-Men, that's pretty darn good. So alright. Wasn't all that big on X-Men Gold and X-Men Blue, but it does now seem like Marvel's starting to figure out what to do with the X-Men. I am pretty much on board now for a new X-Men book because of what they've been doing recently. But okay, now it's time to move into DC, and honestly, DC didn't have as many announcements as Marvel did, but they had the bigger announcements. And the first announcement that I have to cover is that Geoff Johns' Shazam series is finally coming out. This thing has been in production for the longest time. And I talked about this a couple weeks ago when we covered that Geoff Johns was leaving DC. And by leaving, I mean that with big ass quotation marks. He was no longer going to really be an employee of DC, more of a free agent who just happened to work at DC, because Geoff Johns is a guy who wants to create. He wants to do this, he wants to do that, he wants to do this thing over here. He has so many ideas he wants to do, but because he was kind of shoved behind a desk and he had people above him going, no, that would give you too many things to do. You have to go and do this specific thing. You're our guy connecting our comics to the movies and to the TV shows. We have to have you go over there and do this thing. We have to have you do this thing to connect this show to this show and to do this show into this comic book over here. Because he had to do all of that stuff, he didn't get to write nearly as many things as he wanted to. This is a guy who has had projects just dying to be written, and he couldn't do them. But now that he's kind of a free agent, he can finally write them, so that Shazam book is finally coming out, and man, I've been looking forward to this, because we've all been wanting this Shazam series for a while. He is a major character over at DC, and yet because Geoff Johns kind of put his flag on that character and said, nobody gets to write him until I get to write my story for him. That's fine. Where are you going to do that? I don't know. They won't let me write this story yet. So yes, many of us have been waiting a long time for Shazam to finally get a book again, and he's finally getting a book again. But the other reason why I'm looking forward to this one is because it's being written by Geoff Johns, and Geoff Johns to me is one of the best writers in the industry at the moment. And one of the reasons why I say that is because he's a guy who understands the big, goofy Silver Age heroes. He understands superheroes need to have heart, They need to have life to them. They need to be uplifting, bigger than life personalities. And that's kind of what Shazam is supposed to be. And I look at that like, that'll be perfect. And yes, Geoff Johns did write what we have seen of Billy Batson so far in the New 52, including the backup origin story that he had in the Justice League books. And I wasn't the biggest fan of that, simply because he wrote Billy Batson kind of as a jerk, kind of someone who's just mad at the world. But I don't think that was Geoff Johns. I think that was the people above him who at the time were trying to reimagine DC during the New 52 into being a darker, edgier world. I think that was them telling Geoff Johns, this is how you need to write Billy Batson. He doesn't have those people above him anymore, and he now gets to do whatever he wants, so I will be interested in seeing if he comes in here and just goes, yeah, screw all that noise. We did Rebirth, we changed the continuity around, this is how Billy Batson is now. Because, yeah, Rebirth has been all about returning the heart and the life and the love to DC Comics. That was all Geoff Johns' idea. And Billy Batson is one of those characters who kind of needed a big dose of that. So I want to see what Geoff Johns is going to get to do with this character now in the Rebirth age of DC. Another big announcement from Geoff Johns is that he is also finally going to get to do that 3 Joker storyline that has been getting hinted at for years, and we've all wanted answers to it, but no one's been allowed to give answers to it or even raise further questions about it because Geoff Johns hasn't been allowed to write it just yet. Guess what? He's now allowed to write it. Again, the fact that Geoff Johns has now left his position at DC has allowed him to do so much more for DC. So I'm looking forward to that. Also, it's going to be under their Black Label title, which is interesting because DC, as I was just mentioning a moment ago, they've started launching a bunch of different subcategories for their books, and I'm totally behind that. They've got DC Zoom, which is aimed at young readers. They've got DC Ink, which is going to be aimed at more of like the indie artists out there, can come on board and do really weird stuff with these characters. And they've also got Black Label, which, from what I understand, is meant to be just darker storylines with these characters that don't necessarily take place within continuity. For example, the Mr. Miracle series that Tom King is doing, that was supposed to be Black Label, but Black Label didn't get started in time. Maybe because they wanted to kick it off with this 3 Joker storyline, and DC kept telling Geoff Johns he wasn't allowed to write that storyline just yet. So yeah, he's had to wait a long time to kick off Black Label, and he's finally doing it. But as I said, a lot of the Black Label stuff isn't supposed to be in continuity. It's just supposed to be darker stuff that maybe it's in continuity, maybe it isn't in continuity. We don't know. But 3 Jokers is definitely inside continuity. It has to be in continuity. They already established that it will be in continuity. So I feel like I wish Black Label was more of just all one thing or all another thing. Instead, it feels like it's just supposed to be the darker stories. And I feel like, I don't know how I feel about that. Not them doing darker stories. That's totally 100% fine. But darker storylines that maybe it's this thing, next week it's totally this thing. I wish I just had a little bit more of a firm answer on it. That's all. And speaking of the Joker and Batman, because the two of those things merged together is just a license for DC to print money, the Batman Who Laughs, the Batman who in an alternate reality turned into the Joker, he is going to get a miniseries. And it is going to be written by Scott Snyder and drawn by Geoff, which I know a lot of people out there absolutely love that combination. I like Geoff on covers. When he does interiors, I don't know, I get kind of a weird queasy feeling. Not because it doesn't look good, but it's kind of like getting motion sickness. It feels like the panels are moving when they're not. So I just kind of get this weird feeling like, oh, geez, that brownie I ate is just kicking in right now. Yeah, he's a little bit too trippy for my taste, but I understand a lot of other people out there love him, so hey, great. I do fully admit it's just personal taste on this one. But he's getting a miniseries, and in the miniseries, he's going to be fighting another alternate reality version of Batman who basically became the Punisher. This is, so, you know what, DC, you do you. I ain't even gonna criticize this one. I ain't gonna critique it. I'm not gonna come in here and give you my thoughts on this. It sounds so bizarre, but you know what? Cool. Do bizarre. Do weird. It's weird that this one isn't under Black Label, though. Doesn't it feel like with the storyline this dark, it would be under Black Label? Again, that's the reason why I wish that Black Label had a little bit more of like a solid answer to what it was. Because now I'm looking at books like The Batman Who Laughs, like, shouldn't this be part of that thing over there? And for the final story coming out from DC, they announced that they were getting 2 new writers on board. They've already got Brian Michael Bendis on Superman. They've got Tom King on Batman. They're going to get G. Willow Wilson on Wonder Woman. That is huge news, but that was announced before the con itself. And they announced at the con, Kelly Sue DeConnick was going to be writing Aquaman, and Grant Morrison would be doing Green Lantern. They're kind of assembling their own Justice League of writers to write all their Justice League characters. Listen, even if I'm not the biggest fan of some of these writers, they're huge names, and I dig that DC is going after the huge names. Kelly Sue DeConnick is a very interesting choice for Aquaman, but I can totally see it happening because she has written some series like Pretty Deadly, which does take a very magical fantasy look at these darker characters, and I can see them adapting something like that over to Aquaman. So that's why I think that she would absolutely work on that. But Grant Morrison on Green Lantern, that is a big one that nobody saw coming, and I'm very intrigued to see what will happen. Because Grant Morrison is a guy with massive, huge ideas, and Green Lantern is a character who gives you the room to do massive, huge things with them. This will be the first time that Grant Morrison has really written this character after all the other Lantern Corps were discovered. And yeah, he has yet to be able to play around with that toy box. And if there's anybody who could take that huge imaginative idea to the next level, it's a guy like Grant Morrison. However, I'm not just going to come in here and just absolutely praise this idea nonstop because of 2 reasons. One, Grant Morrison has huge ideas, but I don't think he always has the best execution. Like, a lot of times I'll look at the things that he's laying out and I'm like, that's brilliant. But I have talked to people who have read that, and even the fans of these books can't explain to me what they're about. Like, Final Crisis is one of those things that I know people love it, but I'll always point to that like, yeah, that's a good example of somebody with a huge idea not really knowing how to lay it out. But then he came in here with, like, say, Multiversity, which is weird because a lot of the people at my store who I work with who love Grant Morrison didn't like that one, but I, a guy who sometimes has problems with Grant Morrison, loved Multiversity. So yeah, I am constantly back and forth on him. So I'm not coming in here going, this is going to be the best thing ever. I'm going to say it could be the best thing ever. I am excited for it, except there's one other thing that I am kind of concerned about, which is the fact that Grant Morrison takes a long time. Grant Morrison is a guy who he has his own deadline. And this is not his own original, like, mini-series that he's doing, which he's allowed to just do whenever he's able to get around to it. This is going to be a monthly book with the deadline. I think this is going to end up being a massively delayed title. I think it'll be a long time before this book is finally wrapped up, even if it's only like 12 issues. I think we might end up actually seeing, at some point in time down the road, a second Green Lantern series getting launched, because I think it's not out of the question that this book might end up getting delayed so many times. They're like, we gotta do something for the Green Lantern fans who are waiting on this thing to get done. Let's just put out there a bunch of other Green Lantern miniseries just to tide them over until the next issue comes around. But, for all we know, maybe he already has this entire thing written out. Grant Morrison is also one of those guys who he will not write something until it's all done. He will not put it out there until it's all done. So maybe he's secretly been working on this for years, and it's finally all finished. And it's finally there, he's going to turn it in over to the artist, and that's it. That could be what's happening. And if that's the case, this thing will come out on time, no problem. But for me, it's kind of a big wait and see. But even still, the fact that they got such a big name on a monthly series is huge. That's insane. And as I said, you got Brian Michael Bendis, Tom King, G. Willow Wilson, Kelly Sue DeConnick, Grant Morrison. It does feel like they're trying to get together their own Justice League, and I'm totally okay with that. Because if you look at this, it looks like DC is trying to snag up all the big name writers, and Marvel's trying to snag up all the really cool, hip indie writers. I kind of like this. I kind of like that contrast. Because to me, DC is the big, bright, shining god superheroes, whereas Marvel is the down-to-earth regular heroes. So if you get the writers who are the down-to-earth regular writers writing those characters, and you get the big superstar A-class, big, huge name writers writing those heroes, I think that works out. But okay, that's it. Those are all the big announcements from DC and Marvel, at least all the ones I can remember. I'm sure there's something that I forgot that you guys will be yelling at me about in the comments, which you totally have the right to do that because I'm kind of an idiot and I forget stuff all the time. My bad. But those are all the ones that I can remember. There were some stuff that the indie companies announced, like Cataclysm Prime has hired Gail Simone to be their new big architect. I actually think that's really cool because Gail Simone right now is totally at the top of her game. Her Domino series is amazing. If you have not been reading it, it is so much fun. And yeah, Cataclysm Prime, I like their universe, but I don't think that they're really, pushing it as hard as they could be. I don't think they're really taking all those characters to the next level and doing stuff that's really impressing me with them. Just more of like a bunch of cool ideas. I think Gail Simone can totally take them from cool ideas to great execution. But yeah, again, there were all these other little minor stories, but those were all the big Marvel and DC ones. And that's the ones that most of you guys want me to talk about. And I do kind of have to wrap this up right now because I have to record another hour of footage screaming about trailers. So yes, look for that video coming out later today, and let me know your favorite story from San Diego Comic-Con in the comments down below, or on Twitter, Twitch, and Tumblr at Professor Thorgy. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Come back next time. Bye.